Nā mihi kia koutou, mātou hana o Temuka Hui o te rangi, nā te wairua, o nā tūpuna, tātou manaki, I ngā wā katoa, ai ameni. Rakutua.
Nē mai, haere mai, whakatau mai. Welcome along to this consultation, Hui. I think that's my phone going on. So, I'm Mike Quinn. I'm here to facilitate this meeting today. So hopefully to draw a lot of feedback out of you guys to help feedback into the district plan here in terms of the multi-purpose zone that's been proposed in the district plan. So in terms of my background, I've been involved in the multi-land court and multi-land matters for about 18, 19 years. So I'm currently the technical advisor at the multi-land court, and I'm also a deputy registrar of the court, but I've worn many hats in the multi-land court. I've been part of the advisory service, I've been an advisory manager, I've been a case manager. I've also done private consulting for different ahi whenua trusts, multi-incorporations. So I've got a little bit of a background in multi-land issues. So that's who I am anyway. I think I'll get some of the other players to introduce themselves if they want to talk to who they are, what they actually do for the district council. So when the different people are up here talking, you know exactly what they do. So I think Mark's already introduced himself, but you might be able to call up the other members of your team.
Yeah, so we might just have Alex and Lauren and Dean.
So, yeah, so my name's Alex Whitefield.
Can we please use microphones because the people on the other end won't hear.
And it's got printing all over you.
Yeah, and don't stand in front of the projector if you can help it.
So, that works well. My name is Alex Whitefield. We working in district plan review. And also involved in being on the steering group, the technical steering group. We'll talk about it a bit later. So, any questions, please come and ask.
Hi everyone, I'm Megan Gunn. I'm also a senior planner working in the council for quite a long time. I'm also working in the district plan review project with Mark, Alex and Lauren. So if you guys have any questions today, just feel free to come to any of us and we'll try our best.
There is more, but I'm sure we'll see you.
So hopefully with the technology, we're also going to be joined by a couple of people from Hastings. So Erica Mark, who's what we call our Pai Manawa, she's one of our principal liaison officers. And I suppose if you think of the multi-land court process, she's involved at the very end point trying to help owners aspire to their aspirations with multi-freehold land. So she's going to talk about Papakainga development because there's quite a few different developments going on within the Hastings region, and she can talk to that because our Pai Manawa is currently on leave, so she's unable to join us. So she's going to just talk about some of the different types of Papakainga development, from the whānau-based Papakainga development through to like ahi whenua trust or even iwi-based Papakainga. So just showing you the different types of options out there in terms of looking at developing your land. So hopefully we'll have her beam in. I just want to acknowledge that it's good to see so many people here today on such a hideous weather day. I'm hoping I'll be able to get home to Christchurch later on today, so a good meeting is a short meeting. So just running through the outline for today. So we've run through the introductions. Hopefully we've got Erica beaming in.
She's just had a few IT issues at her end. She's on the help desk, I can't do what I'm saying.
So hopefully we'll get into that. And after Erica's talked, and if you've got any questions for her about the Papakainga development, through TPK funding and stuff like that, she'll be able to answer some of those questions. I think Mark said you were going to get up and talk about the plan itself. Then we'll roll into some feedback from you guys, so you can actually have input, and hopefully we'll be able to answer all your questions. Then there was a proposal from the last hui about co-opting some Māori landowners onto the steering group. So I had a bit of discussion about that, and then going to round it off and tell you where to from here. So I don't know if you want to get up and talk in the interim while we're waiting on.
Good, Mike. So just firstly, just about the district plan. So the district plan is it's a regulatory document that controls all land use and subdivision. And so, and it's reviewed, it's reviewed to occur every 10 years, and we started that review a few years ago. And so what we've done is we've released a draft district plan, and that's not a formal proposed plan, so it has no statutory weight whatsoever. And the reason we do that is just really for consultation. So it's our first cut, we say, it's non-statutory, it's not formal, and we just put it out there to get some feedback. So, and I know there's a perception from people that they'll go, oh, well, what's this? You just, I suppose there's a bit of a reaction there, but we've really put that out as an extra step, and we've put it out there for you to be able to understand all what the rules and policies and how they fit together, and it's really for your feedback. And just in terms probably of how the district plan is made, so councils have a statutory obligation to consult with the Registered Iwi Authority, which in our case is Te Runanga Aina Tahu. We consulted them very early on in the process, and they have asked us to consult with Ara Whenua, and of course we have been consulting with AECL, which is Ara Whenua's environmental through that. And so AECL were on our Tauranga Whenua steering group, so that just included council officers and officers from Ariki from Solvency. And so we came up with a concept, or we did come up with a concept, the National Planning Standards have a zone called Māori Purpose Zone, so that zone's, the purpose of that is to try and enable Māori to use their ancestral lands. So that's where the name comes from. We didn't come up with that ourselves. And so we started developing the zone, and the purpose is really to provide for the needs and well-being of landowners, and to create a thriving, self-sustaining Māori community. So it's really to enable people, Māori, to use their land that was given to them. And so I don't want to go through all the sort of different rules, but so obviously housing and Papakainga housing, which is multiple housing on a single lot, is permitted. Cultural activities are permitted, recreation activities. So all the stuff you'd expect to have, be able to do on Māori land, we'll try to provide for that you can do without the need to apply for resource consent. And there's some other stuff we also thought, well, Māori need to be able to economically look after themselves, so we'll provide for commercial activities. And because commercial activities have the ability to have adverse effects, we said, okay, well, we need to manage that through a consent process, so we've provided for it, but we've put in a consent process for that. So that's probably about all I can say really about district plan. This is, I'll just show you, so these are the zones. So here's Waipopo. So the grey is sort of the extent of the multi-purpose zone. Now we know there's a lot of debate about where those lines are drawn. So they were originally developed by our planning consultant and ACL's consultant, and they were based on sort of Māori reserve land, but we realise now that we haven't included everything there, so we'll need to have a look at that. And we're just getting some advice from the Māori Land Court as to all the different titles, what Māori titles there. And here have the Arawhenua Māori purpose zone. So that's about, how's the technology going there, Mike, in terms of the Erica's presentation?
Still haven't got it.
It's 2 minutes away.
2 minutes away? Okay. 2 more minutes. We'll talk briefly then about the Tangata Hui steering group. So the group there. So we've got this group. So what council decided was that they needed an expert group to advise them on the Maori aspects of the plan. So we developed a Tangata Hui steering group. Yeah, so it was called Tangata Hui, rightly or wrongly, and yes, we could have called that Mana Hui. And so the purpose of that group is to advise council on the Maori parts of the plan. So what we've realised through the process is that we haven't had any landowners on there, and obviously the landowners are different to the Runanga. And so what we'd really like is to be able to have probably 2 or 3 different landowners on that steering group. Not a huge commitment. We're probably talking, we are talking about having 2 meetings. And so how the process is going to work from here is we'll have this hui today. We'll collect as much information as we can. We'll reconvene. The next step is we reconvene the Tangata Hui steering group. We'll go through all that information and we'll come up with a concept. So we'll come up with a sort of revised set of provisions and concept. Then we're going to bring that back for another hui, discuss it with you all, and then the Tangata Hui will take that information, finalise the zone provisions, and then make a recommendation to the council. So we'll really talk about two meetings. And so if you would like to be involved with that, we'd really appreciate that. I think Mike's he's going to we'll have a wee session on that later on, just in terms of how we select those people. I'll just talk about the process going forward. So I've talked a little bit about that. So the feedback period ends on the 6th of June. And then again we'll have that steering group meeting, have another hui in July. That's going to be via Zoom. So just to make it more convenient for everyone, I suppose, and to allow Mana Whenua who might be overseas or something to be involved, have the final steering group meeting, and then we'll bring our final recommendation back to Council's Environmental Services Committee. We'll workshop that. So there is a Runanga member on that committee, and then number 6, we basically bring the whole proposed plan once we get that all together to the committee, and they'll decide whether they want to notify them or not.
Can I just interrupt you?
Yeah.
So just, I saw some people taking photos of that board. Just out in front of you, there's a front table, and there is a sheet for that information about the next steps. Phone numbers, contact details, and the ways that you can send it. Anywhere you can pop your sheets if you've got them in a box out there, or emails. There's phone numbers and there's a.
Might be better if you come up here. We've got this.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Not enough?
Bring the microphone down.
I was just giving the opportunity there's some information sheets out the front with all these dates. All the dates on it. And you can submit your feedback in a number of ways. You can either use the sheets that we've provided, fill them in, pop them in the box out there, email them to us, or drop them into the council offices, and the details are on that sheet that's out the front door there. Or, yeah, you can submit the feedback however you like. You don't have to use the forms, they're just a prompt. Use them if you wish.
Just run through my...
Matua, could I just say something?
Hi.
I've just got to address you on the 1868 Kemp deed, which was discussed. Now the Kemp deed, which section of and set aside land, now you've got to realise this, which set aside land for people, that was the settlement. Now can you understand what the settlement was? When our tupuna the day were made landless, this was the settlement that was arranged for our Māori people. So it was actually a settlement. But please realise, it was not part of the Ngāi Tahu settlement. Can you understand that?
Hi.
So the Kemp deed was a settlement on behalf of the tupuna's grievance for being made landless. So in 200 years, kei toka e te kaupapa i tēnei ha. Kia ora matua.
Kia ora. So basically, the multi-purpose zone is a zone that incorporates Māori freehold land and general land owned by Māori that are still held within the descendants of the original owners of those original native reserves or occupation reserves. So it is a way for the Timaru District Council to recognise the mana whenua of the owners in terms of creating this new zone. So we all know that, like, if you want to do something on your land, there are certain rules and conditions which they call resource consent. Now, under the multi-purpose plan, or the multi-purpose zone, or the Kainga Nokoanga zone, or however you want to frame it, basically it will pretty much state that if you have Māori freehold land or general land owned by Māori, and it's still owned by those people who are of the hapu that's associated with the land, then there are a number of activities that you can do. You don't need to have resource consent. So these include residential occupation, papakainga development, home occupations. I'm not sure what home occupations are, but that's something else you can do without having to apply for resource consent. You can do homestays like Airbnb and stuff like that. Basically, marae complexes, they won't need resource consent. Kina, so sports and recreation facilities. Whare taonga, urupā, but the Māori Land Court can create those anyway, so it wouldn't have been consent issue anyway. Pou, mahinga kai, food gathering areas, kura kaupapa, education, community facilities, farming, public amenities, kohanga rio, health facilities, hauora, Māori cultural activities and conservation activities. So if you're a Māori landowner or a Māori landowner of general land owned by Māori, you can do all that stuff without applying for a resource consent. So it's giving you more opportunity to utilise your land as you see fit.
So what does that mean for people like myself that have bought land in the country for that very reason, so I am not built out by other commercial buildings, housing, so it's just tough for me and other landowners that have bought out there and built. We spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on resource consent.
But at the end of the day, it was set aside as an occupation reserve for the mana whenua that were there at the time. So they haven't had the ability to utilise that area for that purpose themselves. So it's just giving them the opportunity to utilise their own land.
I'll just make a comment based on just what was just said there. In this document here, you've got the intention of the Maori Purpose Zone to place less controls on mana whenua to use their land. Okay, which is fine. My question is for the district planners, the Megan and Alex. Obviously the protection of value and all of that sort of thing of the land that surrounds or is incorporated within the Maori Purpose Zone, being the privately owned land within that. So, as far as if you're building, as far as the district council are concerned, they obviously have a responsibility to manage the use of land, what's built on the land, and control property management development by way of certain criteria such as recession planes and all of that thing, which help protect the value of the land, by the neighbours. What I see here is we've got a zone with less controls. At this point, and I'm talking specifically about the Waipopo part, the local Maori haven't displayed any respect for the land or the ability to control management of land just let me speak, by way of how they've managed the Waipopo huts. Waipopo huts. We've got, you've got derelict huts that have just been left there for years, doing nothing with. So as far as having the faith of what they're going to do within this Maori Purpose Zone, when that's how they've treated that land, it doesn't give us a lot of confidence in relation to the development of a Maori Purpose Zone where there are less controls. So as to Megan and Alex, what controls are, by way of the council, what controls are to be applied to the development of the Maori Purpose Zone by way of the Timaru District Council?
Yeah, perhaps you can answer the question.
Sorry, well, I can probably answer that, Alex, if you're okay. So there are like some standard controls. So setback controls from zone boundaries. So if you're if you border the Māori Purpose Zone, there's setback control here, I think like 10 metres. But as Mike was saying, I mean, this land was always intended for Maori settlement, and in the operative plan, so this is the current plan, we have papakainga are permitted. So that's any number of houses on the land. So that's the baseline which we're operating on now. And so what we've done in the current plan was we're just finessing that really. We're just saying, okay, let's just have a look at those rules. So, and in terms of your land, if you're a private freehold landowner within the Māori Purpose Zone, you can continue to still do what you do, use your land as you're using it. If you whakapapa back to the land, that gives you additional rights, because that was always the intention. If you don't whakapapa back to the land, you can just continue using it how you're using it. It's just the same restrictions as there always was on that land. Does that help answer your question?
No, not really. The bottom line is, I suppose, it's not so much what's happening on the land that is owned, that's owned by the private landowner. It's the activities relating to what's happening on the Maori Purpose Zone and the controls applied to that. Obviously, if they're building buildings on that land, they have to obviously meet code. Obviously, that's obviously part of it, just like everybody else has to do. Obviously, there's talk about the setback of 10 metres, and I suppose it's just all those activities which I completely understand, and I have got no problems with the rights and the way that's all explained and the use of the land and their ability, but it's just simply, it's the ability, making sure, I suppose, that the controls within standard building practices and all of those things are adhered to as part of that development of the Maori Purpose Zone in relation to all of the activities and the buildings and things that they can put on their land. So I suppose my purpose again is for Alex and Megan is saying, are those controls the same in relation to the building of buildings and development as would be applied to normal residential development within Timuka for anyone else?
And the answer there is yes. And I think what you're talking about is standard building. So in New Zealand, the standard building is governed by the Building Act and Building Code. And what we're doing here today, the district plan doesn't affect that whatsoever. So that's just the building code is just really sort of an engineering standard, if you like. It's about keeping people safe, making sure the buildings stand up, and so that doesn't change at all.
Just a point of clarification, you made reference to the state that within the zone, private landowners would be looked on differently to mana whenua.
Yeah.
So that's quite interesting, because I would have thought you zoned it specific for an area, mana whenua being private landowners, and also general land by private landowners, but there would be two sets of rules.
Yeah, so what the original zone is based on the land that was originally given to Māori, and now some of that land has gone back into private land ownership. And so what the rules say is that if it is a private landowner and someone who does whakapapa to the land, you can do exactly the same as what you're doing. You can keep doing that, but if you do whakapapa back to the land, you have the same rights as everyone else does in the Māori people's zone, because that land was always intended for Māori citizens.
So when we look at coverage percentage for Papakainga, for example, so everyone understands at the Hui, if the bylaw is that on mana whenua would be able to build up to 35-40% coverage, that will apply, but that rule wouldn't apply in the case of general land within the Māori purpose zoning.
Yeah, so if you've freehold title and you don't whakapapa to the land, it's just the same, it's basically the same district.
So it'll be zoned rural, for example,
Yep.
one dwelling per 4 hectares,
Yep.
for example. That's good, thank you. You've clarified that.
Sure.
Tēnā tātou i te whare. Whārahara ki toku nei ingoa, ana huirio no huinapa. I just wanted a bit of a clarification around the giving back of that land you noted just now. I think it's misleading to inform people that don't have the historical background of what you suggested happened. I think because that's not what happened. It wasn't gifted, or it wasn't given to Māori in the way that you suggested. So I'd like us to have some historical background for this hui regarding the lands, firstly, and then I'll come back to the question.
And I think
I can cover that.
Yeah, I think
That's easy enough.
yeah.
Okay. So, going back to the terms and conditions of Kemp State, under the terms and conditions of Kemp State, as part of those conditions, there were 15 occupational cultivation areas that were set aside from Kaiapoi all the way down to Purakanui. So within the mana whenua or the aro whenua area around here, you had aro whenua, waipoko, tūpoko o Rakatauhiki, and also o Rakipaua.
Which is the bay, Māori Hill.
Yeah.
People might not know that. It's Māori Hill, 20 acres.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the one in Timuka.
It's not acknowledged anymore.
Yeah. So that's tūpoko o Rakatauhiki. So what happened is basically when Kemp's deed got actioned, all of the land was transferred to the Crown. Right? Then under the terms and conditions I think there was a joker called Kettle came down and he surveyed off what the areas would be in terms of the areas that were to be set aside as occupation reserves. Then in 1868, we went to the Māori Land Court for the Māori Land Court to determine ownership of these occupation reserves. The reason it came to the Māori Land Court to determine it is the Crown couldn't issue a Crown grant in respect to these occupation areas until ownership had been determined, because the Crown couldn't issue a Crown grant to a tribal entity, shall we say. So what the Māori Land Court did is it had a number of hui throughout the country, throughout the South Island, and determined all the native reserves all the way throughout the South Island. And then you find, if you went and had a look at South Island Minute Book 1A, you can see there's a recording of these court hearings in 1868 where they determined who the owners were, but in terms of the Crown grant, a Crown grant at the time could only be issued to 10 or less people. So you find that there's certain people who are set out as the owners on these Crown grants, but they have little asterisks to their name to denote they were there in the capacity as trustees for the rest of the people who have been identified as the owners. So that was 1868. 1870, 1871, Crown grants were issued for each of the native reserves, because that's what they were called at the time, apart from Aroha Whenua. Aroha Whenua had a Crown grant drafted up for it, but it was never actually signed. It came into the land transfer system later on as a whole series of different warrants. So warrants are not a Crown grant, but they're warrants that are issued by the government. And it's kind of a long story short. So these Crown grants were then issued. Then again in 1886, 1887, we came back to the Māori Land Court because there were questions about who had different rights to these occupation reserves, because only certain people were noted on the Crown title. So the court got jurisdiction under the Equitable Owners Act, 1886, and we went back and we looked at all of those people who had been determined as owners in 1868, and we determined who their successors would be at the time, and also included other people who weren't included in those original grants in 1868. And we then looked at partitioning the blocks and putting them into smaller parcels, kind of like you find them today. So that all happened in 1887, 1888, and basically those people who assigned the different parcels of land at the time, they can trace their whakapapa through to the current day owners in the Māori Land Court record. So that's kind of, I suppose, a simplistic summary from my point of view. So hopefully that answered or clarified some of that for you, Aroha, in terms of giving that background to the meeting. Kapo? Any other?
I just a quick question. You talked about parcels of land. Is there any reason, I'm just looking at the map here, is there any specific reason why the area of land known as the Waipoko huts is in the open space zone rather than the Maripupa zone, or is that just a mistake at the moment?
So I brought that up in our meeting the other day, just to say, I've read through the feedback from the last meeting. I know that a couple of people raised the point that the Waipoko huts wasn't included in the multi-purpose zone, and I thought there was an error because that was land that was added to the reserve. So in, I think it was 1891, the Crown bought a 7-acre parcel of land, because if you look at the original Crown grant, or the map for the original Crown grant for the Waipoko Reserve, it actually used to border the river, and I suppose with natural process of accretion, the course of the river changed. So the local owners lobbied Parliament to say that basically we no longer have access to our fishing resource, our mahinga kai, so the Crown purchased a 7-acre area, and at that time, before it transferred it over to the ownership of the Model Land Court, it enabled different hut owners onto that area, negotiated certain leases at the time, and ownership was then transferred over to the Māori trustee in 1921, and then that area expanded from the original 7 acres to take into account the accretion. So I think there's a map in here somewhere. Yeah, so basically the 7-acre original area was through here, and the accretion spread throughout the rest of it. So I think that's a kind of point we're clarifying with the District Council at the moment in terms of including that land into the multi-purpose zone.
Just where you rubbed your hand across that,
Yeah.
that's all riverbed, that green, eh?
Yeah, so that's the accretion.
It's all riverbed land.
Yeah, but so if you look from here across there, this is all within the ownership of the Waipopo Huts Trust.
What about the privately owned sections out there?
No, that's
Well, well, if you went on to Māori Land Online, anything that's coloured grey in Māori Land Online has been identified as being Māori freehold land. So those areas that remain clear on the map are still general land. So in a simplistic view, they've just covered what the whole entire zone would look like, but there would be patches of general land in that.
makes sense. Like Pearson Park and
Yeah, well, that's the thing, I know fun, and are you guys planning on developing all those empty batches that are not occupied out there at the moment?
Right. That would be a question for the trustees to contemplate.
What's the council going to do with amenities out there, like with stormwater and town water supply and stuff, if you're going to be building all these houses and developing the area?
I can answer that briefly. So there's no current plan at the moment to, to provide Waipopo with any infrastructure. So that's just the state of the play at the moment. So with the, with new houses, we'd expect that they would be, for water supply, they would be provided with a bore or with.
So our water bores are actually dropping at the moment because of the intensive irrigation around the area.
Yeah, we understand that, and so it's an issue. It's an issue, and so it could be rainwater harvesting. A number of people do that around the district, implementation of water. But we realise it's an issue, and it's not
paying quite high rates out there, and you still, all you really do is put a bit of blue metal on the road and you do rubbish bins. Like, you just put our rates up, a couple of weeks ago, and that's the thing, we've got you guys don't like to forget about us out there. Like, you put the water lines out at Fairview and all that, which already had existing town water supply. So what's the difference between us and them?
Yeah. So I suppose there's a number of settlements in the district that don't have any services, and most of the rural settlements in the district don't have services. And so that's I suppose it's a question for the long-term plan. If there's if there's a need, or if there's a request for services, then you need to get involved in that process, or
He's just asked for that service, that he's paying his rates and he's getting no service. That's what he's saying.
I completely understand that, and I suppose what I'm saying is that, so this is about the plan, this is the regulatory plan. It's not the financial plan that controls, expenditure and provision of infrastructure, but that's called the long-term plan, and that's going on at the moment. So you're welcome to have your say in that process. And there's a number of councillors and the mayor's here today, so you're welcome to talk to them about that. But at the moment, there's no plan for service in that area. And when we come up with a multi-purpose zone, I suppose no one, our Whenua or us, no one were expecting a sort of massive influx of residents all of a sudden.
But it could happen and you're not planning to do anything about it.
Well, yes, but there's no...
Three campaigns turned up in the last year that have parked themselves out in
Can we have the microphone on these people,
Yeah,
please?
sorry, just, the benefit of those on the reserve.
Right.
So it's a progressive one person serves at a time. Are they not
Yeah,
working?
can even you use the microphone? Yes, sorry.
So it's not an uncommon situation for areas to have no services. And as I said before, so most of the rural settlement zone district, most of them don't have any services whatsoever. Rural lifestyle zones don't have any services. A large amount of houses in the rural zone don't have any services. So it's not sort of an unusual situation, and particularly where we're not expecting huge amounts of development all of a sudden. But I take your point, it's something that can be looked at into the future, so it's a good point, thank you.
Mike, there's
Okay, I just thought I'd comment on that respect. I think that there's been an elephant in the room, because I think obviously people are conscious of the fact that services aren't provided to most of these regions. I think what we have to do is understand that conceptually there could be potential for co-governance, and co-governance meaning working between the council and potential relationship structures that look at those very aspects, especially in respect to the mana whenua land, because it is the aspirations of the owners to develop and grow. But I think we also recognise that structures are really critical in doing that and be successful in the development. So I think what we have to do is just futurise a little bit that it's an opportunity for partnership and potential future governance structures, whereby there may be investment from outside sources working with council planners to develop those systems that are ecologically fit for purpose for development. So I'd just like to throw that on the floor. I think we could get lost in the discussion by debating about rates, what we get for rates, all those things, and I think we just have to have a more open mind that this is only the beginning of a long process, which has taken over 150 years basically to... Is that wrong again? Sorry.
That's all right.
To get to this point. So look, that's all I would like to contribute in terms of value from where I sit personally as to a vision for the future for our whenua in the reserves.
Kia ora. And just in response to that, I'm glad you brought it up. It's co-governance is not something we've considered today, but it is something being considered around the country, for this type of thing. So the council, I suppose, says it's always open-minded. To suggestions like that. We took the approach when developing this in partnering really with our whenua. And so, and they wanted to exercise rangatiratanga or kaitiakitanga, and we know those concepts are different. And they wanted to be part of making the zone, and they wanted to have an ongoing role in terms of the management of the zone. So, that's sort of a form of partnering. It's not co-governance, but it's a form of having a stake in the ongoing management of that area.
To connect with Erica, who's in Hastings. Then after that, I'll go through the feedback questions, then run through the district plan as well. So without further ado, hopefully we'll put Erica online.
Good, can you hear us?
Yes. Thank
Okay,
God
we can hear you now.
Right. Aloha mai, whānau, tēnā koutou, yes, and aloha mai, apologies for the so much for having us here today. My name is Erica Matt. I'm from Te Koti Whenua Māori or Hiratonga, so I'm from the Hastings Māori Land Court, and I have with me today my colleague and friend, Shalom. And if we can go to, the first page of the presentation.
Yeah.
That would be wonderful, thank you. So one back further. Ka pai. So, as I was saying, thank you so much for having us here today. I really appreciate it. Myself and Shalom are here today to talk about our Papakainga experiences here in Hiratonga or in Hastings, and to talk about potential options for Māori to develop their land for housing purposes. So, in our district here, Papakainga is really common, and myself and Shalom are really privileged that every day we get to support whānau who choose this as an option for their land. If we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So basically, what is Papakainga? Some people usually think Papakainga means house, or is a house. Traditionally, Papakainga was a community, and it's whānau living in a whare or in houses with usually a common purpose. And the purposes vary from Papakainga to Papakainga. And sometimes the purpose might be to get a kai, it might be just to occupy the lands. But the places where people decided to build their Papakainga were selected for their purpose and their connection to their particular place. So today, many whānau where we live here in Hastings are returning to their traditional lands to raise their whānau and provide a place of safety and well-being for their tamariki or for their children. So we'll go to the next page and have a look at one of our first examples. So this particular Papakainga is Te Kuringa Papakainga. And this particular whānau chose to return to their lands that belong to their kaua or to their grandfather. From every angle of their rural Papakainga, they can see important aspects of their petinaha. So they can see their maunga, they're down the road from their marae, and they're parts of the whenua. They formed a native plant nursery on their whenua. They have a Māori tourism business, and one of their residents, after building their Papakainga, realised that it was so important for council representation of this Papakainga process that she's now an elected member of our local council. Council and whānau in this Papakainga process work hand in hand, and you kind of need to work together. If we're going to go to the next example, it's really different again, because again, Papakainga is different depending on the people. If we can go to the next slide, please, and then we'll play the clip. So here's a little clip about some whānau in the Waimarama area, and talking about their Papakainga area.
Where our people used to live, probably back in the 1700s, and there's a big power site behind it where they used to fight and defend themselves up on the power site. So it's a coming full circle for our whānau to come back onto our Tūranga Waiwai.
Suddenly Baden decided, after the big jobs all over the place, he wanted to come back to Hastings and build here. And I had loads for them coming, and then, well, that prompted me to make that move to head towards Papakainga housing. So we could all just be here, we'll all be together with our own whares and our grandchildren and great-grandchildren, and they will have the honour of being housed out here at Waimarama.
A whole cultural connection and reconnection for this whānau. And yeah, I've got a brother moving back from Hamilton. He's been away from Waimarama for 25 years, so he'll be coming back and he can't wait.
We've never ever leased any of our lands. We've always farmed them ourselves, so that's quite a unique achievement. Waimara has been one of those places where it's become more and more difficult for our people to come back here and build houses. The tourism and other ventures, they can actually sit alongside that movement back with the family, trying to find them something to do.
My mother lived here, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, my great-great-grandfather, so this was their land.
There's a lot of old kōrero and whakapapa that comes into this whenua, but having people on the whenua is something that our family have strived to do for many generations.
So that was Papakainga that's here in the Hawke's Bay region, and there's a shot at the end of this presentation, near the end of this presentation, that's really beautiful of the beginnings of their build. If I can go to the next slide, please. Cool. So this is another version of Papakainga, I guess. This is Wainako Village, Papakainga, and it's found in an urban setting, and it's centred around a community marae. So it's not a tūpuna marae where marae has been there forever and a day. It's marae that was built for the community. And this Papakainga came because the development of it was focused around providing affordable, warm and safe housing for all the members of the community. I guess it's an interesting spin on the Papakainga concept because it's based on about being part of a community. And at the heart of things, that's what Papakainga can mean. It's being part of the community. It's not a type of house, it's just a feeling, an ideal. The next example that we're going to go to is the Arohatirangi Papakainga in Puhipariki, and my colleague and friend Shalom, she will speak about her journey and for her and her whānau in this Papakainga space. And if we can go to the next slide, please.
Tūna koutou katoa, ko Shalom hanga hau no Mātikoro, Ngāti Marina Koto, Tautahu, me Ngāti Katamanu hoki, tūna koutou katoa. So yes, this is my whānau Papakainga. We're in the small rural Māori community of Puhipariki, which is kind of between Hastings and Napier. On this particular piece of whenua, it was only an acre. We've managed to build 5 homes on there now. I'd say that it was really a 50+ year vision for my koro and his siblings. But it's been in the too hard basket, I suppose. And it wasn't really until 2012 the next generation decided to pick up that moemoeā and start looking into it and see what we needed to do to get things going. But that was a 3-year journey, really understanding all the different parts of the process at the Māori Land Court, sorting out our successions and things like that. And then, we had no technical knowledge, so building our knowledge and understanding up around that. And it wasn't really until 2015 when we were able to kind of start the feasibility process of our Papakainga development. And it was really, really awesome because we got to basically go from the beginning to the end of it, having a fully costed out project. We knew who we were going to build with. Our design was very intentional. So we did things like, putting the nannies and the papas in the car on the weekends and going around and visiting different show homes, not necessarily with intentions to buy, but just to get an understanding of what we liked and what we didn't like and what was important for our whānau. So future-proofing was very important for our whānau. But also creating a design design in relation to the environment that we're living in our whenua was also important. But also practical things like having slightly wider hallways just in case someone is going to be in a wheelchair one day, or lower lifts in the shower so that our kaumātua can get in and out safely. We're all poto and shore, so there's no point having high showers and cupboards and things like that. So that was part of the beginning part of our journey. But I just want to add to that, probably the biggest thing of the journey is the whānau side of things, keeping everyone on the same page, making sure that everyone feels valued and respected in the process. Because I guess, from time to time, there are whānau that feel like they're going to miss out on something in the process. But at the end of the day, everyone can remember that this is for everybody. This is for you, this is for our past loved ones, this is for our tamariki, and this is for our future. So the effective process took us about a year to go through. By the time we moved into our homes, it was about 2018. We're going to share a little bit of the process that we went through right up into a bit of the opening of our papakainga, but I also just want to touch on the relationship that health enabled. Papakainga and council is definitely a vital part of that. We're very fortunate here in Heretaunga that we have papakainga incorporated into the district plan, and that was done in 2008. And yeah, it was a little bit slow to get whānau off the ground and start working towards papakainga, but post 2015 it just took off. So through this papakainga process here in Heretaunga, by the end of the year, I think it's about 152 homes will have been built through this process. So the benefits for us now that we've been living in there for just over a year, home water, wellbeing, connection. It wasn't until we moved into the papakainga that we learnt some more of the whakapapa of the whenua. So for example, we didn't know that popcorn used to be grown on our whenua. And grandmother used to give all the moko was a different job, and then someone would pick the popcorn, someone would pop it, someone would colour it, someone would bag it, and then every year at the show, when the show comes to town, they'd all go off and that's how they'd make their money. And so this used to happen on the whenua that we now live on. During COVID lockdown, it was the safest place to be. Our marakai was flourishing, so we had access to beautiful fresh veggies. Although we didn't break our bubbles within our homes, we could stand out on our deckheds and look over to Nanny and Papa and give them a wave and make sure they were okay, So yeah, there's actually lots of benefits, not just financially, because you're not paying for the whenua, you're actually just paying for the build of the home. So the process might be a little bit different down there, but that's how it is for our whānau here in Heretaunga. But it's really about the connection as a whānau that's really, really important to us, and it's just really, really blossoming at the moment. So we'll just share this little clip of my whānau's journey. Kia ora.
So we're supposed to be music tonight.
Music, right?
Would it be? Can it be?
I can turn that music off if you want.
Turn it up.
Turn it up.
So that's pretty much the end of that clip, whānau. I guess what we're trying to say today is that papakainga comes in a lot of different shapes and forms, and sometimes when people think papakainga, they think a hut or a shanty town or something that is just not the true essence of what a papakainga is. If we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. Cool. So I guess this is kind of coming near to the end of our presentation, because it's just a quick overview of what papakainga can be and what papakainga is in our district here in Hastings. And as a district, we have made, we've got lands available for papakainga developments, and I think throughout the country we're kind of leading the way for papakainga housing development. And if you kind of got anything from this presentation, it's just an idea about the different types of papakainga out there. Papakainga will be based on the whānau and the whenua. It won't be based on a cookie cutter, every kind of house looks the same, everything has to be the same, because not every whānau's needs are the same. Not every whānau has the same whenua that they're utilising. And it's a way for them to come home, it's a way for them to connect, not just with their whenua or their whānau, but with each other as a community. And as you can see here, there's a few more different papakainga. The one on the top left, that's out in Waimatama. And Waimatama, sorry, I kind of assume you guys know sometimes, but that's out of town. So that's rural communities. Like most of our papakainga here are done in the rural communities. And they're not close to all the accesses that we have in most, urban towns. They have to, create their infrastructure, do those things on the whenua themselves. And on the right-hand side at the top, that's one of the community areas for papakainga in Aorangi, in Waipatu. It's our Aorangi papakainga. And that particular papakainga has a number of whānau living there. And again, they were displaced from their tupuna land a very long time ago, and being landless and homeless, they eventually were negotiated some land for themselves, and through that they've been able to bring housing to their people and make those that were homeless and landless have a home. Aorangi have a communal area where they have a shared picnic seating, they have like a shared barbecue area, and they gather there and they utilise those spaces the best that they can. And the bottom left-hand corner is a beautiful shot of some papakainga being built out at the moment as well. So they have a beautiful look over the ocean, over their whenua, and the houses themselves are really beautiful and take and utilise, I guess, all those beautiful sceneries that they have. Hopefully by the end of June or the end of this year, because there's been a few kind of technical difficulties, we'll have around 150 plus houses built here in Hastings area that relate to papakainga. And we are lucky, like Shalom was saying earlier, that the local government here was willing to be part of that process, and the whānau here were ready to start taking on that process and taking on those challenges. If we can go to the last page, please. And to round this off, this is just a little whakatauki, and it's about people build a house and a house builds people, because that's essentially what papakainga is. It's about, that community spirit, that bringing those connections, and having whānau be part of something together. And that, everybody, is us for today. And thank you so much for having us. And if there's any part-time, we've got a few minutes that we can do that. If you'd like, otherwise, advise. And I'm sure you guys have lots of kōrero that you need to keep going on with. And you guys are just at the beginning of your journey and thinking of all the awesome options that you will be able to do on your whenua and bringing everybody there along for that journey, because, you know, it's an awesome journey to be on. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, any questions?
Yeah, kia ora. One question, one main question I had on the papakainga kaupapa that you fellas have done. Through yous being mana whenua, you know, did yous through your district council, did yous have to change your zoning, for instance, like from mana whenua to multi-purpose zone? And in saying that, if that was the case, how did that fare with you on your rateable value on your land, and how did your rates change? Kia ora.
Kia ora, Shannon here. So we don't have a multi-purpose zone. We can keep our whenua in holding title. Like I mentioned before, Papakainga has actually been incorporated into the district plan, which has enabled us to develop our papakainga and determine it really how we want it to be. In terms of the rates, I mean, we've always argued why do we need to pay rates when there's no water and things like that to the whenua, like there are literally no services there to the sites. However, during the build development side of things, we were able to, we were able to put our rates on hold until the homes are actually built and moving into them. They did actually increase once the homes were up and once we were living in them. But, you know, the council just basically said to us that you're now accessing X amount of services, and this is what we think the costing is for it. I don't think that necessarily answers your question, Matua, but that's what the process was for us here.
Me good.
Any more questions?
Kia ora, can you just tell me how many parcels of land the whole papakainga is?
So each papakainga or each papakainga build is different. So for example, Shalom's papakainga build, that was 5 houses on 1 acre. Some of the other builds, they might have several acres and maybe doing more, more house builds on there. So it really just comes down to, I guess, the wants of the whānau and the capacity of the land, and having those beginning conversations between whānau and the council.
And just on that note, so the whenua is usually generally one title. However, in some cases, we may be working across two parcels of land, but all that technical side is worked out with the multi-land court, whether it be right of way or a bit of land swapping and things like that. There's actually 101 ways you can go about it. It is case by case.
Kia ora.
Thanks, Erica and Shalom. Thanks very much for your contribution. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to talk to the whānau here. So thanks very much. There's no further questions from the floor, so we'll just keep going with our hui and you can get on with your day.
Right, no
Right, after that inspiring presentation, what I'm going to do now is we're going to run through the district plan or the provisions of the multi-purpose zone.
Sorry, Mike. Can I just ask a few questions to the Mighty Land Court and also to the council as far as the parcels and stuff like that goes?
Yeah.
Kia ora, I'm Teresa. So my question to Mighty Land Court is, I'm a huge supporter of papakainga, but I just want us to put in some context that the parcels of land here in size are quite different to other places in the motu. So my question is, if we take a section here and there's maybe 30 plus owners, and when you go to do a succession, then you're allocated a share. So I want to know what process Māori Land Court are going to do to stop fragmenting so we can actually move forward with papakainga. And also when the succession goes through and then goes to LINs also don't feed that land ownership or changes to local government. So I'm just wondering how we're going to logistically do that. So if I personally know, and a lot of us do, what our shares equate to in a land area. So what does that, how does that actually look logistically, and will we go to do it? How are we going to actually do it as far as the parcels? Because they're not amalgamated, they're all individual at the moment. So if I wanted to do it, the process at the moment is that I have to go to Māori Land Court and do a succession, not a succession, the licence to occupy. Now that's a 3-4 year process, and everybody has to be on the same bucket for that. But what happens when we're not?
So many different aspects to your question.
Well, they are double barrel questions.
In terms of, I suppose, the breaking down of the, shares into smaller and smaller parcels of land, shares within the. So there is the opportunity to create what we call a whānau trust, and the whānau trust prevents shares from fragmenting further.
Yeah, but
that works where whānau get along.
So and it's not about getting along or not getting along. So if you're removed for whatever reason, if you go and do a succession because we know that we are Māori, that's what it is. But the system doesn't actually tell you. So when you go to Māori Land Court, you just don't go through the people of what?
You just don't go through the system of what a trust is. You do no education for whānau around that. So 16 years later, after I did the succession to my grandmother, I went back and I formed a whānau trust to prevent that. But 16 years ago, even now, there is no education. So I just want to make sure that we're doing this, and Māori Land Court have a huge role in actually furthering papakainga. It's the council don't register any title on their system as being Māori. The only reason that they don't, the reason that the rates remission for Māori is because you've got institutional knowledge with Sue who applies that.
Yeah.
Now they have so many parcels of land that the address is Timaru District Council. So I just want to make sure that we're getting some good foundations from the start of this process, and don't live in the dream. The dream is fantastic and I'd love us all to get there, but we need to actually be quite practical how we're going to do this, and some of the systems for us to do that need to change. So I just don't want us to be constantly comparing to what other people have done, because their parcel size is completely different as well. So we need to model off us. And, yeah, so.
So you're right, the Māori Land Court does have a huge responsibility in disseminating information to owners about how to, I suppose, fulfil their aspirations on Māori land. So I don't want to make any excuses. Yes, we haven't done the best job possible. We do have additional resource in the Māori Land Court now, and we're trying to fill that gap that's been vacant. So I did work with the Māori Land Court up until 2017 when they made me redundant. Now I've come back. So we now have new positions in the Māori Land Court. We're I suppose up to about 17 or 18 in our office in Te Waipounamu. At one stage I think there was only 11 of us. I hear you about education. Trustees, there's a huge gap out there. Like in terms of what we provide basically what I refer to as Trustee Training 101, which is just the bare basics. It doesn't really set you up and teach you basically governance skills. It's governance skills that are really, really required. So there are numerous trusts out there and trustees who don't even realise they are actually trustees. And those trusts have been defunct through no fault of their own. Basically, there are certain processes that trusts should be going through, but those people are put in those positions as trustees, but they don't have any of the support around them. And that's something that we'll be working with our colleagues in TPK in terms of being able to roll out some governance training. I know that in the North Island there is a 6-week course for Māori trustees to go on to learn about governance and different ways to, I suppose, look at facilitating the development and utilisation of their land. Did have something else in the back of my head. But in terms of making sure that all the information gets to where it is, we have been talking about the need to ensure that if trustees are appointed to different blocks of land, if ahu whenua trusts are created over blocks of land, then those orders should be disseminated to the council so they can update their rating valuation so they know who are the people they should be talking about in terms of different land blocks. There are changes coming to the Local Government Rating Act. So Māori land that is unutilised or undeveloped is non-rateable. It would be non-rateable under the new Act. Māori land where development is taking place, they can apply to have the rates remitted for while it's under development. So there's all these things trying to come together to try and, I suppose, help facilitate the development and utilisation of Māori land.
Sure, Mike. And to the Speaker. Just like to just summarise a bit. We recognise that every bit of land has its different characteristics, and Araphenua and Waipopo are no different. There's 1 acre sections that went to Tipuna, and then there was 10 acre sections went to Tipuna. The 10 acres is very much whānau based, but the single individual sections, yes, have now got hundreds, thousands of owners, and the answer to it in terms of structure and how to develop it needs a further korero amongst the mana whenua, and possibly, we could actually have a small little hui amongst the mana whenua after this hui if they wish to just talk about that briefly and to analyse some of the information from today's hui. That's all, but I tautaku the Speaker. It's complicated, it's complex. There are solutions, but we all need korero around what those solutions may be. That's all. Yeah.
My name is Michelle Reihana. I've got a small section on Hopkinson Road. I'm a general land owner, but I whakapapa to the marae. I just want to balance this meeting out a little bit. Can you put your hand up if you're a general land holder? There's quite a significant amount of general land holders who I don't think are opposed to papakainga housing. I think it's a great thing if you're a Māori multiple owner of that land. But what about us general land holders? We don't get anything out of being in this zone apart from changing from rural land zone into Māori purpose, which doesn't benefit us or anyone else at all. The other thing is, why is the boundary of the zone including so many of us? I don't understand that, because surely it should be kept rural, but if you're a multiple owner of land, then you can go under the Māori purpose zone. Why isn't it called a lifestyle, I don't know, lifestyle rural zone? Because if you are a general landholder and you're not Māori or affiliated to the marae, you can't do a lot of this papakainga housing, which is unfair. Now, our sections or our land is our #1 asset. If this goes ahead, which we're quite happy for multiple owners to have this, if this goes ahead, I'm sure that our land is going to reduce in price significantly. Thank you.
Alright, so now we're going to move on to the district plan itself and have a look at the district plan. If anyone's had a read of the district plan, they're quite hard to understand and grasp. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get Mark to move through the different sections of the district plan. Then I'm going to come back to the feedback form and run through the questions that are on the feedback form to grab whatever feedback you have in relation to the form that was sent out. Alright?
So I think we've just scrolled down to the rules. And rather than focus on the policy objectives. Keep going.
Oh, thank you.
A little bit more.
Sorry. Can we just go back to the question that I asked you? I just want to, this doesn't go.
Let's go.
Let's go. Can you just clarify, as far as local government, what support you have for implementation of, as far as landowners on their individual titles?
So we don't have any support at the moment for that. So I suppose the support we are providing is through the district plan. That's the only support we're providing at the moment.
Okay.
So we're looking after the regulatory part of it, but we haven't. I suppose we haven't, formed any groups or tried to address some of those other difficulties you're referring to. So.
And the only reason that I know that is because I work in local government.
Yeah, and I think there's a question there too. We'll have to look at that and go, is that our statutory remit or is that Māori land court's interest? But I mean, we definitely we hear what you're saying and we hear the issues, but whether it's our role or Māori land court, I'm not quite sure, but might not have a deal with that.
So in terms of, I suppose, developing Māori freehold land, it's probably more akin to something that Te Puni Kōkiri feeds into. So I know that, like, so if you wanted to develop a piece of land, you'd come to the Māori Land Court, we'd help you update your ownership, we'd probably look at helping you put together a management structure, something like an ahu whenua trust, making sure that your terms of trust suited what it was that you're looking at developing. And then once you have that structure in place, you'd go to Te Puni Kōkiri and you'd apply for funding as the trust, and the trust would get some feasibility funding from Te Puni Kōkiri, and they'd help you run through what it was you actually wanted to develop, and it would fund somebody to come and help you, I suppose, develop a concept plan for what it potentially would look like. And then they can also look at providing some assistance in terms of infrastructure planning as well, and that infrastructure cost. So as part of their Whenua Māori Fund and their Māori Housing Fund. So I think it's probably a bit of education out there about where different funding is available and how you can access funding and what you actually need to do to access that funding is probably helpful at the same time.
So I get all of that, and so I've done all of that.
Right.
Okay, so I'm just going to use us as an example. So then I go and apply to Timaru District Council, or tell them whoever that I'm going to build. But on their system is what I'm saying. They don't have registered owners. So they don't have them all on there. So that's what I'm saying is if I go and do it and I'm given approval, but I don't want to be detrimental to anyone else further down the track. So that's what I'm saying is
So basically that the ownership information that we hold at the Model Land Court should match.
Yep, they don't, they are not, they don't match.
Huh?
So when a succession goes through,
Yeah.
and it goes from Motor Land Court and it goes to Lynn's and all the polygons are all drawn on,
Yeah.
and all the rest of it, that information does not flow down to local government. Hence the reason that we have a variation in this here,
Yeah.
because they have no copy of the title. So I could go and do something, but nobody else is aware of it. So all I'm saying is if we actually get part of the beginning process right, and everyone talks about what their systems actually do, because they don't talk to each other. So that's what I'm trying to articulate. They're not the same information.
Yeah, well, that's probably something we can have a discussion about. Try to make sure that information is matched.
Cool, thank you. If we just scroll down to the rules there, Megan, are you doing that? Okay, so what I'll do is just flip through the rules so you sort of try and understand them. So, under district plans you have different classes of activity. So the first class is permitted activity, so these are things that you can do as of right without resource consent. So the first one on the list here is residential activity. And
Sorry, Mike, just before you forget that, talking to people who are sorry, it's better. Talking to people, there's certainly confusion about building consents and resource consents. The district plan is only about a resource consent. So if you might have heard statements like you won't need consent, that doesn't mean you don't need building consent. Generally, you need a building consent when you build a house. The smaller buildings you often don't, but generally speaking, you absolutely do for a house, and for a lot of buildings, you need a building consent. So really, these rules are, it's different. So for the first one, the residential activity, that just means houses.
Good, thanks for that. So I can take the one. So the first rule there is for residential activity in houses. So you can build maximum one house per site. Okay, so that applies no matter who you are. Or if the land's owned by the rent owner, we can demonstrate a whakapapa connection. You can build multiple housing. So that's the sort of public kāinga provision. And people, criticise us there. We've sort of got that approach through the Christchurch City Plan Review. So they sort of had a pretty robust plan review process that went through a hearings panel, and that's where they settled on.
So if that's already in the rules now, why are we changing the zone?
So it is in the rules, and the purpose of the zone is to make it more clear, what the intention of that zone is at the moment. So at the moment, under our district plan, we have a provision for public kāinga, but it just refers to the site. So if the public, sorry, just let me finish. If the public were looking at it, they'd have no idea really as to what council's sort of intention and vision was at the zone. So zoning is a way we make things clearer and go, okay, this is what we want to occur. It's distinctively different. It's shown as a different colour on the map, and there's different rules that apply.
So in those videos, they were highlighting housing was done without zoning change to any house. So once again, why are we changing the zone?
Yeah, and that's an option. That's an option. But
it's not an option that you're even proposing the way the whole is possible.
Yeah, what we've released is a draft plan, so that's just an initial first cut. And so, and we have said today, we're saying, hey, we're willing to start again and look at all the options. And when we get the steering group, that steering group can go, okay, well, one option is we just leave it the same. We just leave it the same as the operative plan, no Māori kuta zone. But there's some, I suppose there's good practice, to call it Māori kuta zone, and that's what's emerging around the country. But we can consider that. So thank you.
There's another thing, because if this is rural zone, then in a drought plan it will be the general rural zone, and that has a density control, so you can only basically have one house per 40 hectares.
So there needs to be inclusive public hire. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
So you don't need a Māori rules, a Māori zone. You need a rural zone, public hire is the added thing, the additional public hire.
Provisions in the district plan for public hire housing.
Yeah, and so that's one option. We can look at that. I'll keep going.
But you've got over 100 signatures saying that we don't want this zone, Māori purpose zone. We don't want our land zoned this. You've got a lot of signatures saying we don't want it. Sure, we want Papakainga housing for Māori multiple owners of land, but for us general landholders, we don't want it.
That's fine, thank you. That's good for you. And we'll consider that through the time.
And if you are a general landowner and you do own it, we have the option of also having public
We'll keep moving. So if we go down to home business.
You're just flipping over things like that. We haven't had an answer from you.
Well, so just to clarify, so the role here today is not really for me to give definitive answers as to what the rule is going to be. We're trying to get information. Well, firstly, trying to explain the rules, what we've got, and trying to get information from everyone in terms of what their response is to those rules. So that's the purpose of the day. It's not about justifying what the approach or trying to say what the approach is. I'm just a council officer, and so it's got to go. What I'm saying is that Tonga Whenua Steering Strips is going to make a recommendation, and then it goes to council. So I can't sit here and say, well, this is okay. Let's go with no Māori purpose. I can't do that.
I hope it's well listened to.
Yeah, we certainly are, and that we're here to listen and truly try and understand. So home business is a defined term, so that allows. Hold on a second. I'll just explain the next one. So it means a commercial activity that's undertaken or operated by at least one resident of the house, and it's incidental to the use of the site for residential activity. So you can do that again as a permitted activity. Question at the back there.
You're saying that the steering committee, so how many people are actually on the steering committee?
So at the moment we have an elected member from Temuka District Council, so Barb Gilchrist. We've got myself, we've got two members from Araki Environment Consulting Limited, and we are asking for more landowners to be on that. So Mike's going to take us through that today.
How many more landowners are you looking for?
So we probably want two or three. So the next one's visitor accommodation. So that's permitted as well, maximum of 6 people. So just sing out if you think that these things are wrong to enable on this land. The next one's Mariah
You're going too fast. Could you go back up, please? Sorry.
Would you like me to start from the start?
Well, no, that one there.
That one there. So home business,
No,
visitor accommodation.
Mark, we have a question here.
Yep. Okay, go.
Kia ora everybody. I seen on Marae last week, they talked about exactly this, and their papakainga was about the size of this whare here, and 13 families lived in it. So here, we've got it, there's only like 6 people per night. So there, I can't even remember what it was, but for visitor accommodation, blah, 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 up there. So we probably, my family, would be looking at that, a maximum occupancy for 30 people per night.
Okay, thank you. Let's get that back. Sorry, Alex. So how that works is if you go over that, you require consent. So the intention was, with a sort of an intensity threshold where you go, okay, well that's enough where you just go, that's permitted, there's no problem with that. But anymore, you've got to get resource consent just to consider the impact of it. So you might be looking at things like car parking, having sufficient landscaping, that sort of thing.
So, Mark,
Yep.
so from my understanding is that would be where you're renting out accommodation for people.
Yeah, so
not your whānau, you're going to have people come to your house.
Yeah.
So
If there's a
like
part of
Airbnb or something like that.
And so
Well,
there's-
that's what when you see Marae Complex, Yes. Marae Complex is bigger than visitor accommodation. I'm thinking about my own family and more than 6 people. So, in this papakainga on Marae last week, they had 13 families and the whare would be about the size. So it wasn't actually a marae, but it was a whānau papakainga for one particular family.
If you want to invite your whānau over, there's no limitation on that. It's
Well,
just-
I don't have to invite her.
Yep.
Just be invited.
They just turn up, right? so just to clarify, so you can have as many. There's no limitation on the number of houses. Okay. There's no real limitation on the right complexes, but it's just a limitation on visitor accommodation. Marae complexes, again permitted. Where taonga, permitted. Urapa cemeteries, permitted. And we've had some feedback there, Michelle. Yep. Do you want anything else to say on that?
Well, last time. Just so that people are aware that an urapa, a cemetery, is a permitted activity. So you can start a cemetery on your property if you want to, or you wake up in the morning and look out the window and there's an urapa next to you. I mean, we've already got an urapa in Arowhenua. How did this get through? I don't know.
So then, that was just to respond to that. That was requested, obviously, by the by ACL, but that's fine. I mean, it's good feedback, so thank you. Next one, making a kai, community facilities. So this is for the education stuff. Following the Rio. So you might want to just click on community facilities begin, and we'll just see how that's defined. So that's the, if everyone can see, they'll read it out. It means land and buildings used by members of the community for recreation, sport and cultural, safety, health, welfare, worship, anything ancillary. That's quite a broad definition.
So is that talking about our marae then?
Also,
That does all of that.
so that would probably include a marae, but we've actually got a specific rule allowing marae. So
Is that right? It was further up.
There's your marae rule there. So marae complexes are permitted. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question? Just want to know why we're so prescribed.
Well, I mean, this is how plans work. They define terms because it's a legal document. It's it's like a regulatory document. So, but I think to answer your question, the thrust of that is, there's massive amounts of stuff that can happen there. As we just looked at that definition of community facilities, that covers a huge amount of stuff. And so there's a range of activities that can occur on this land as being permitted. So it's quite broad, and I know we've got defined terms, and that's just how plans work. They have to be, they've got to have sufficient certainty.
I just wonder if we've forgotten the purpose of the reserve in the first place was to accommodate for our people, the descendants of our tupuna that have originally there, plus our other whānau that have come into the area. I just can't understand why there's a legal prescription over our land without the consultation. That's one thing, and then we already know why we're here. And then this is a draft and I understand that. And I will be looking forward to that steering committee, what they come up with.
Right, yeah, cool. And just to reiterate, this is, we started consulting with this a long time ago with Marai. We've worked with AECL, we partnered with them, we produced a draft plan. We had a Hui a couple of months ago, we're having another Hui. We've got this tongue to finger with the steering group. If there's anything else we can do, we've pretty much done everything we can. So there's lots of consultation.
Can I just say something?
There's a question in the back.
You said you started consultation with this a long time ago, and you listed individual landowners that weren't part of Taka Tawhine or anything like that. They weren't even consulted about.
So it's really quite hard for council to consult every landowner in the district. So we do that broadly. We put notices in the newspaper, websites, we run advertising campaigns, we had radio advertisements, we had public open days. We consulted on what, right from the start, we consulted on what the issues were, and then we consulted on some discussion documents, some issues and options, and now we're consulting on the draft plan. So there's been an enormous amount of opportunities for the public to get involved in this. We can't write to every landowner about every issue, about possibly how the district plan could affect them.
Okay, we've got up here first.
Kia ora koutou. Listen, I know we're hearing, you've been in consultation with the steering group people. It just seems a pity here that we've got a whole lot of documentation here in front of our eyes today. It would have been nice to have actually had the steering group people here who have been guiding you along, on our behalf, without our knowledge, to actually speak to it, to why we've come to these deductions up here in front of us today. So I just needed to say that out loud. Thank you. Kia ora.
Can I just ask, when you talk about that it's really hard for the council to communicate with landowners as a collective, so can you tell me, as far as your GIS, what sort of data set did you run on the titles or the land to actually do that?
So the data set on the titles is based on what we call the cadastral, which is Land Information New Zealand. They administer the cadastre, as you know, coming from local government, and so that is the official titles and details of the land, and that's the appropriate way, of course, for council to operate. And going back to your question before, if that's not updated for changes in ownership, I'd be a little surprised, to be honest, but that's something we can definitely look into.
Yeah, but I guess that's another problem area there, is you actually have no idea numbers, how many this actually affects and how many the council as a collective are actually reaching. So I've looked at your Facebook page. I haven't seen anything posted, but I can tell when there's a councillor got a new t-shirt. So I'm just trying to put it into some actual context of the importance of it, because not all of us live down here, and some of us want to know and love to know, and actually will have the right to know. So I don't know if your communication has, and correct me if I'm wrong, I might have missed it, but I certainly didn't see it on Facebook, and I stalk it.
There's no recognition of Māori.
Yeah. So I'm just saying, that's what I'm saying. You actually do have the tools to actually do a little bit better in that area, because we flew down from Palmerston North, because we do whakapapa here, and we do here. So there are other things that you can do, whether you're not talking wide enough. Sue Collier in your rates department, she's got a huge knowledge base, and she's never been included in any of this, of how it's going to work, all the contacts that she has. So just being honest.
Yeah, that's cool. Hey, I can say with my hand in my heart, we've tried to plug every avenue from, getting our people to, drop notices into people's letterbox at our event. We're going through the Runanga's email address through our own. We've contacted Māori Land Court. We've put a notice in upcoming with the Māori Land Court to the Pānera Runaka. And so, but there are challenges in trying to get, we know there's so many people on those titles and they're spread all over the show. And so it's a real challenge for everyone. So we acknowledge that and...
so that's where you, when you come to your steering group, you actually start having people on there that have these skills to bring. So I don't know your steering group from the council, what qualifications you have got, because I don't know how you were elected. That just, you know what I mean? Like to be elected onto anything, you bring a set of skills. So I'm just making sure that the steering group, you've got a broad perspective. So it caters everybody, because at the moment it certainly is not the case.
Just sorry, get a little bit on the ownership matter. Sorry, yeah. As local authorities, we don't hold land ownership information. That's all held by Land Information New Zealand.
Yep, and
so the contact, so the contact details we were having is what was recorded in our rating system. So that'll be the contact person for that property.
Yep.
That's the only contact detail we have, and that's the only thing we can run with. My understanding is Land Information New Zealand is running a 10-year project trying to improve their systems, and hopefully that could better align with the local authority documents. So hopefully in time, but again,
but that's what I mean to say is you have that institutional knowledge. So a lot of people here would actually think that all of their names are on that title, through that title in the rating system with the council, and it's not.
No, sometimes it's not even the landowner, sometimes it could be a lawyer that's held in contact.
And sometimes the people that lease the land, and they have more right to say than the actual owner.
But that's what I'm saying.
I'm just conscious of time. This is all good stuff, but what I really want to do is make sure everyone understands what we propose, and then Mike's going to come up and try and lead a discussion, because the key thing with this workshop today is trying to really understand aspirations. So I'm going to try and work through this. It's 20 past 12, and then we'll move into that discussion, and there's plenty of time for you guys to have your say, okay? So,
just a quick here, this the form you sent out that we all got and filled out, are you guys going to read them and take note of what's been answered on this?
Well, yes, of course we are. And as I said today, I mean, it's all about us trying to understand your aspirations. But of course we're going to read them. Yeah.
It's the same as what you're putting up here, what's in this document here, is it?
Sorry, say that again?
It's the same sort of answers you need out of this thing.
Yeah. So we'll go to Rule 12 there, Rule 11, healthcare facilities, multicultural activities, recreation activities, excluding commercial recreation and motorised sports, going down there, farming, excluding intensively farmed stock, conservation activities, public amenities. And so the other ones here are things that require consent. So these are things where you go, okay, that activity could have an effect on the environment, effect on the neighbours, and it just requires resource consent to make sure it's going to be okay. And so we've got commercial activities, offices and retail activities here. Got industrial activities. And we've got as non-complying, so these are activities that we're not really expecting in the zone, but you can still apply for a consent for them, but it sort of goes through a special statutory test where you've got to prove that the effects are going to be really less than minor, and so we've got mining, quarrying, plantation, forestry, intensively farmed stock, they're non-complying, and we've got wastewater and effluent ponds and effluent spraying is non-complying. And then just moving on to the standards, Megan, if that's okay. So we've got a standard of 3 metres setback from land which is in different land ownership, and 10 metres from a zone boundary. And so those standards actually are a little bit more permissible than what's in the general rule zone. So we're trying to enable more development there. Building and structure height. So the height's 10 metres basically from ground level. Standard 3 there is about outdoor storage, just requiring stuff to be screened. And servicing, keep going down to that, and that's probably not, please, Megan, and that's just basically saying that you've got to demonstrate there's a potable water supply, we've got enough storage. Yeah, so I'll take final questions on those rules, and then we'll go. I want to quickly move over to Mike to sort of facilitate discussion. And it'll be based on the questionnaire, based on those key questions that we'd like to hear feedback from. Yes.
I was just wondering what your definition of intensively farmed stock is.
Yeah, we do have a definition, and we realise there's some problems with that. So you go to that meeting, can you? So there it's there. And so there's a clear desire by the AECL that they didn't want intensive farming. Had a lot of feedback about that, so that's something that we'll have to closely consider. Don't know where we'll land, but that's something that we'll have to look at.
So it's not permitted to have 10 beefies on your paddock. Is that correct?
Have we looked there? No, well, I think it's if it's got to be on irrigated land. So you could have
or not.
Well, your dairy cows are different with the dry or milking, or whether on irrigated land or not. So dairy cows would require consent. Farm pigs would require consent. Farm pigs is generally consent required for that anyway. Under rule zone.
So most of us have got cattle on our land, and we're break feeding, which stays up the top. And in this, it's saying it's a non-complying activity. But the majority of us that are farming in that area are break fencing our cattle. Just like a basic thing. Sorry, it's just like a basic thing that everybody's doing. And now all of a sudden, it's become non-compliant.
Yep, and so, as I said before, we got some pretty clear direction from the cultural advisors that they didn't want that. And so we looked at this, we've had plenty of feedback. Just finish that, and we're going to have a look at this. So we've got that feedback.
Can you tell us how you got the Cultural Advice Committee in the first place? How were they ever appointed?
So how it works is, under the Resource Management Act, we've got a statutory obligation to consult registered iwi authorities. So in that case, that's not Tahu. And so we consulted them very early on in the district plan review process, and they said, okay, well, for this project, we want you to consult with Arafina. We started consulting with them. Then AECL was created, so Araki Environmental Consultancy Limited. And so their main purpose is to provide cultural input, to councils on resource consents and through plans. So they, I suppose, are the environmental arm of so that's how that was done. Yeah.
Except one of them lives on Barrack Road, right in the middle of this whole zoning. Would you not consider it a conflict of interest? The right
Not necessarily, no.
Okay.
So if there's no more questions, we'll move on to Mike, who's done a facilitated discussion on the sort of broader aspirations. Thanks for that.
Right. So as part of the feedback that the council's looking for, which is stuff like Michelle's saying, they've developed a series of questions. So I'm just going to run through those questions, and if you have feedback on those particular issues, it'll be recorded and compiled as feedback for the council to take into consideration. So the first question is in terms of a multi-purpose zone or a rural zone with public kāinga in it, what do you want to see happen at Waipopo, at Arowhenua? What are the types of development that you want to see happening there?
want to see that in what people huts is included in the Māori cushion zone, because that's where the most difference is going to be made in the rural housing.
So the lady at the back just said that she wanted to see the Waipopo Huts Trust, or the area that's governed by the trust, included in the multi-purpose zone or the rural zone with papakainga. So she just wanted that incorporated into that area.
Yes.
What other types of development or what
We'd like articulated services as well, like sewerage and water, which we've never had.
Right. So this is the stuff that they want.
Yeah, well, that's what we wanted. We want to develop Waipopo Huts. I know it's, as the chairman said, it's not in a good state. However, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, I think, five trustees here today.
Yeah.
We're all new trustees, so let's forget about the past ones. There are a couple of them still on our board, but we want to develop Waipopo Huts, and so we want services down there. And along with that, we've got the Upahi Reserve and Peterson's Park. So there's a fair number of people that live in that area. We want to keep the costs down, as like for people to live there. It's cheap to live down there. We want to maintain that. But, you know, we need some support from the council and financial support as well. We did get some money from Punikokiri for administration, to do governance, to get ourselves in order, because I have to say the trust was in a pretty bad state of affairs, and we want to do the right thing. So we don't want these derelict houses down there. We don't want squatters down there, which we've got. So we do plan to tidy it all up, but that's not going to happen overnight.
And it's not going to happen if we don't get, well, if we don't get those same provisions, because it doesn't allow us at the moment to do that. And I live in Waipopo, have for the last close to 14 years, and in the last couple of years we've found that there are people coming in and just parking up on land. We take our water from that whenua and they're using it as a wharepaku. We don't want to see that happen in the future, so we need some support from the council and ECAM to uphold the standard of living down there, and that's not happening at the moment. We are going to them and they're just ignoring us.
Could I suggest that some council members would perhaps take a car and drive the distance right down Waipopo Road and just have a look, open your eyes and see? Thank you.
And I'm more than welcome to come into my house, because I live in one of the huts. I'll open my doors and show you what kind of water I've got, and I'll get a glass of water. Kia ora.
Okay, so I suppose you saw all those things that they ran through, you know, what were permitted activities, and basically what you could carry out without a resource consent. So did you think there was anything in that shouldn't have been there?
I shouldn't be having to go to the Runanga to ask permission to do anything on my land. I'm also an owner in Aotearoa on Hopkinson Road. I don't expect to be going to the Runanga and saying, can I accommodate my family on my own land if I want to build papakainga housing?
Yeah. I don't think that was actually in the rules. So basically, as a landowner, if you're in that zone, you can do any of those activities. You don't have to go to the Runanga to consult with them. It's your right as a landowner to do it.
Well, there's something
So I can answer that. So he's right. You don't have to go to the Runanga if you want to build a house or papakainga. So there are some situations that you do have to go to the runanga. So for the activities that require consent, the commercial activities, and so and where this comes from is that what's called kaitiaki tangi. Correct me if I get that wrong. And so that's the exercise of guardianship. And so the Resource Management Act requires that we consider that. And so that's where that comes from. So they're trying to exercise guardianship where there's a commercial activity. But if that's not, if that's not right, if that doesn't sit well with you, let's hear about it.
May I ask about activities that are already happening? For example, people who have businesses in the proposed Maori purpose zone, are they going to have to shut their business, or are they going to have to apply to the runanga, or are they going to be allowed to just continue as they are?
The short answer there is no, generally. Most activities that are legally established have that right to continue.
That sounds very funny. I just want to touch on a couple of cultural aspects of this and about the rules and law legislation around Ngāi Settlement Act. And that I just want to touch on with you, Mark, or the councillors that are representing us down here. Mana whenua is legislated under the Ngāi or under the Runanga Act. Tangata whenua is under the Treaty of Waitangi. So there's a difference around that. And just making sure that we understand what it means. Tino rangatiratanga comes under the Treaty of Waitangi. The landowners, whether they be, excuse me for a minute, around general land, or not general land, but those who don't whakapapa to huirapa. The Settlement Act, the Ngāi Runanga Act, does not give the authority to the council to act on behalf, or the runanga, vice versa, to act on behalf of the landowners. That's really essential that you get that, councillors. It's also essential that we understand that tangata whenua are the descendants of huirapa. Mana whenua are through the runanga, the representation. We can be mana whenua, tangata whenua, who whakapapa te huirapa, can also be mana whenua. Okay. So that means that we can't have our rights extinguished under the Treaty of Waitangi or under the Settlement Act. That means that we have a say, but we have a legal say. Not AEC, Ōraki Environmental Consultancy Limited. They do not have a legal say over the landowners. Now the mana whenua that we're talking to, the councillors are talking to, mana whenua under the Runanga Act comes into a takiwā situation. That's the regional situation. It's not over the authority, the tino rangatiratanga of the people. It does not diminish or extinguish their rights. So that's why we're getting a little upset.
Oh, kia ora, yeah, kia ora.
And I think, and thanks for that, Darren. And that's why I think it's absolutely crucial that the landowners are represented on the Taumata Whenua ceremony.
Right. So the next question here is like, when you think about Waipopo and Arawhenua, what are the aspects that you consider, I suppose, most special or tonga tuku iho? What are the things that make Arawhenua, and what make Waipopo?
Whakapapa.
Whakapapa. There you go, right.
There you go.
And water,
What more? You want to know about the water and everything else? They all roll in one.
Mahinga kai.
Okay, so here's a good one anyway. So I think this goes to what Liz was talking about. So what, if anything, about Arowhenua or Waipopo would you like most to change or improve? I think this is where you're talking about services.
Look, you did a presentation before about all these houses and the development and everything like that, which is all very pretty and lovely and all that sort of stuff. And what I seen was a modern housing development, which has been built correctly and all that. I just cannot, and if those and if that's the intention of the local Maori to use the land in that way, then that's great. But I think everyone here would look at those photos and say there is absolutely no way that you can develop that with a holding tank and without services to be able to accommodate it. It's you're selling a dream by way of a video and everything like that, and showed what's there. Yet the reality about Waipopo or Arowhenua or whatever is that unless there is a drive from the council to support the use of that land and how it is by way of the dream that you've shown us, well then it cannot happen without the creation of services.
Just an answer to that question. That's about reaching the next level with the plan.
Yeah,
right? So,
agree.
Yes, hi-ho, let's first get through the first hurdle, and then we'll see who can put the plans together.
So the next question we've got here, and we've heard a little bit about it so far. Basically, whether it's the individuals here today, or the whānau here today, whether they support the creation of a multi-purpose zone, or whether they support the creation of some other form of structural planning that surrounds these occupation areas.
Well, I don't think that this Maori purpose zone has been put up to us as part of that. After seeing that video, I don't think people around here realise that you could actually do this housing development without the Maori purpose zone, like that outfit has done on the video. Yeah. So apparently, the Maori purpose zone is designed, seems to me, is designed for the purpose of making it easy for the council to operate the zone, rather than what may or may not be best for the landowners surrounding it.
So they have their own zone, but they call it a papakainga zone, and it incorporates many of the aspects that are set out in the multi-purpose zone. It's just what's the name?
It's the name.
Just to clarify that the multi-purpose zone name is actually from the central government. It's a national policy standard.
Yeah, just clarify that. It's a name from the national policy standard, which was gazetted in 2019. I'm not sure in the video when their actually specific zone was created, but following 2019, all council need to obey the national policy statement, where in that statement, of course, if you are trying to encourage the Maori development and to actually bring people back to their original land, that's what the name of the zone, that's basically what's actually in the statutory document, that's we have to use it. But we are also talking to the minister saying, hey, is there actually any ways we can alter the name? Because the name may not actually
It shouldn't blanket the whole area when you've got private landowners in it, and it's going to be detrimental to them.
So why would you not just have a rural zone with a bylaw provision or something that just talks about the couple, whatever?
Yeah, as I said before, I mean, that's an option, and that's what we can look at. And I think the intention is always the same: is to be able to provide Māori to fulfil their aspirations to be able to develop their land and live on their land. And so, how we get there, what planning instruments we call, whether we call it a Māori purpose zone or rural, or whether we come up with another Māori's name, you know, there are all options we can consider. And what I'm hearing is, you know, people don't like the Māori, they don't like the name. Maybe something a bit more specific. Yes, let's look at other, do we need the zone at all? Could we get there another way? So it's all good feedback, so thank you.
So there's question over here.
I'd just like to say that nowhere else in any council district plans is there a zone that's identified by one ethnicity when so many people who are of not that ethnicity live in the zone. And yeah, that's it.
I've got a question.
Yeah, and I think that they have the same thing in Christchurch actually. So same situation. Called Mighty Purpose zone, I think there, and they've had
They're called Papakainga zones.
Yeah.
And they refer to Raupaki, Okatahi, Wairewa, and Onuku. But they don't include Ngare
I mean, the reason that we have got other people moved into our reserve is because
in the first place, the council stopped any building way back many years ago. So people did want to live in the vicinity of the reserve. However, the council put a stop to that and said they cannot do it because there's no facilities, there's no utilities, sewerage, and well, they wouldn't give us water either. So that's why the people moved out, sold their blocks, sold them off, and that's why we have got others living within our Māori reserve. I'm happy about that. But in the first place, it was the council or government that drove us away. That drove the people away, not me, but drove the people away.
And there's pros and cons either way with this, you know, whether we include the Māori Purpose zone or not, if we include it general. But, you know, but one of the pros of including the Māori Purpose zone is it just recognises it for what it is. Yeah, well, and it doesn't matter what, you know, what we call it. If we've got Papakainga.
Well, it actually does matter what we call it. That's what we're talking about.
So
it does matter. It does matter what you call it.
Yeah. And so what I'm saying, there may be a degree of flexibility about, you know, whether we call it that, but the guide, you know, the sort of the national planning standard says this is what we want you to call it. If that's what you're doing, this is what we call it. And so that's the direction. I suspect there's a little bit of flexibility in just the words we use.
Can I just ask though, if you zone it and you name it there, what does that decrease the value of the section?
No.
To the market, because it is also, whether it's Māori or not, it's also an asset. So if you want to build and then you change it, it's no different to, that's why we have zoning. Coastal zone is more expensive than normal zone. So if you apply that zoning here, if we went to go and put a buddy on there, and so I just want to make sure that when you're zoning that there's no cause and effect or flow on effect, that by renaming it that you're actually unintentionally actually decreasing our value, even if we were yet to go to do it, because it is still held over that land anyway. So
yeah, and it's a very good comment. I'm glad you raised it. So we raised that as an issue early on. We got some advice from a valuer, and they said, yeah, generally it won't.
I think generally and a guarantee are two completely different things. Because if you go to the bank, and you say this is what it is, because we all know that it is zoned, whether it's rural, residential, or coastal, or general coastal, that plays a huge impact as far as how much you can loan against.
Yep.
Now that's no different to whether you're on a Māori or a general title. So we just need to make sure that if this goes ahead, that we also aren't disadvantaged when we go to do Papakainga. So there's lots of different steps along the way to make sure that we have protection, is what I would be say, if what that means financially over that title, what it means for us.
Yeah, and I said generally because I was about to finish that. So what they're saying is it doesn't really matter what the zone's called, it's the provisions of the zone. And so, and why I said generally, because he did raise an issue with the rangatira taonga provisions. He thought that would potentially devalue the zone, and we've had feedback on that. So, that's something we'll be having a very close look at, and particularly because, there's a number of reasons. Obviously, there's what we're hearing from Araha here, that it's different. The marae doesn't represent the landowners, so why should they have control or input? And the other thing is, does it affect the property on the land? So there's two reasons there why we might move away from those provisions.
But you don't actually know though. That's the thing, we don't know. We haven't done any feasibility testing. We haven't gone to any banks. We haven't gone to any. We actually, when we're saying these things, we actually have no fact to make sure that this is the best thing for us wanting to move forward either.
So we went to a registered valuer to ask that question. We said, will that zone devalue that land? And they come back and they said, generally no, but the Rangatiratanga provisions potentially might. And so that's an issue. I think that's an issue, and that's one reason why I suspect the Sarah Group will move away from that.
Yeah, but none of us have been privy to that.
No.
That consultation that you've had through this whole process. You've never have actually said, well, here's this information. This is what we've done, because I've never read it, and so it's kind of like you're feeding us bits and pieces.
Yeah.
But you have never disclosed that report to any of us, as far as my knowledge goes. So correct me, I could be wrong, but I feel like I'm pretty try to keep informed and contact the council and stuff like that. But at no point when I've talked to Alex or anyone else have you actually said that you have done this and this and this, because you haven't given it to any of us, anyone in this room to read. And I think that's unfair, because that puts you on a different playing field than all of us.
Hey, that's a fair comment. And so we haven't released any of the sort of the background, what we call Section 32 reporting for the draft plan at all. So that report sets out their pros, it sets out some of the, it might be the economic evidence, it might be, evidence from a session. We haven't set it out at all for any of the chapters. And that was just a broad decision because, and I won't go into the reasons why not, but we're only releasing a draft here. It's not the proposed plan, and so and that's fine because we're just getting feedback, and that's cool. And when we do release the proposed plan, all that information will have to be provided.
Okay, there's a question in the back here.
Not a question. It will devalue our assets. Real estate, we've talked to real estate agents, they've told us it will devalue our assets. Who's going to want to buy a whare where possibly a marae could get built in front of a uruka? I wouldn't, and I'm mana whenua. That's BS. It's not true what you're saying, and I don't want it to be false. A false dream for our people that they can go and build there when it's not going to end up being a reality.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, so we went to a registered property valuer for that advice. We didn't go to real estate agents because that's not what they specialise in. But we can, we'll probably get that advice looked at again once we land on the provisions that we take to council, and we'll be getting that peer reviewed.
Also, banks won't loan if it's multi-land.
I think that's probably something you can
There are.
It doesn't have services as well.
I know that there are certain banks that do have packages for model landowners, like Kiwi Bank have kainga whenua loans. There are certain banks that don't understand multi-land at all, so they steer straight away from it. But that's not to say that you shouldn't be able to get a loan with them. There have been examples in the past where people have gone to lending institutions, haven't been able to get a loan, given the fact they could also actually meet the lending criteria, and those banks have actually been subpoenaed into court. And they have ended up giving, I suppose, loans to those people who are servicing those loans. So there is opportunity for multi-landowners to get mortgages. So that's something that Jo, who wasn't able to make it here today, that's something that she is, I suppose, concentrating on. She's forming a network with the different banks and stuff. So she could probably come down here and do a session with landowners about what the different banking packages are, what they look like, and actually suggesting certain people within certain banks that actually understand multi-land and whānau trusts and how multi-land issues actually work. Like, I suppose one of the main things we get is somebody goes into a bank, they take in their whānau trust vesting order and their trust deed, and the bank goes, that's not a proper legal document. And we've had to go along to the banks and I suppose on many occasions to actually say, well, actually, it hasn't been drafted by a lawyer, it's been drafted by the bank. That is an actual legal document. So they just, I suppose they're even further behind the eight ball. They just have no understanding. We're working with banks to try and, I suppose, educate them more.
I think just as a general comment, what we can appreciate is there's a lot of challenges in developing Māori land. We're trying to sort out that, the council's trying to get the zone provisions right so it enables the development of that land. We realise there's issues with banks that we're talking about. There's the general issues that you guys have raised regarding the legal side going through the Māori Land Court. There's big challenges, but council's trying to do the right thing by sorting out the district plan to make it easier.
I've got a house and land on Barrett Road. So if it was zoned Māori purpose, you're telling me that it would be really hard if I wanted to sell it, for somebody to get a loan. And that reduces the value immediately.
So is your land freehold title?
It is freehold title.
Yes, so that's just a normal, lending situation that apply there. So this is what the issue is getting loans for Māori reserve land or Māori freehold title, yeah. Right. So it's not affecting your land there. And so as I said, the property values come back and said, no, it won't affect the value of the land except the rangatira tone provisions. He thinks that will, and so that's something we can look at. That's something we've got, okay, that's an issue.
Just tell me if I'm incorrect, but if someone that's connected to the Araphanua Wakapaka builds 4 or 5 homes on a block, which is the proposal, what happens when they want to sell those blocks? Is it restricted to go back to the Wakapaka, or can they sell it to anybody? Is that would reduce your...
In that instance, I would believe it to be restricted to what we call the preferred class. So it'd be people who actually whakapapa to the hatu that's associated with the land. Generally, most banks, when they lend on multiply owned land, they have a set criteria that the house has to be built on piles. So if the person defaults on the land, then they can jack up the house and take the house away. So the security is not against the land, it's against the house. So potentially if someone wanted to sell to someone outside of the preferred class, they could sell the house, but they'd have to take the house away.
Clarifying that.
Right, almost through the feedback form. And there are, I believe there's feedback forms available at the front here. So if anyone wants to take it away and provide further feedback, you're welcome to do so. So I think we've heard that there's some general themes or trends running through the meeting. One's about services, one's about whether the zone itself is appropriate given its name, or whether there should be a different type of approach, such as a rural zone with bylaws relating to papakainga development. So I think those are the major themes that I've taken away from today. I suppose the only thing that is left is looking for volunteers or people who are looking to go into the steering group. So we're looking for 2 or 3 different people to go in the steering group, and as you said, we're looking for people who have, I suppose, complementary skills that they can actually contribute to the development of the plan, to give feedback and input in an advisory capacity. So we're looking for any volunteers, and if there's more than 2 or 3, I'll probably get you to come up to the front, introduce yourself, and just give a bit of a spiel about what skills and knowledge and requisite ability that you have and what you'd bring to the steering group committee. So basically it's similar to what we do when we elect trustees to an Order Land Trust. Also, whether those people, when they put themselves forward, would be broadly acceptable to the majority of the people here. So if there's more than 3, we'd probably have to look at taking a vote with the people here. So is there any interest, is there anyone who's willing to stand as part of the advisory committee?
Can I just make a comment? Can I just make sure it's clear that, because I feel Waipopo and Arowhenua are 2 different areas, and that Arowhenua has its own services, Waipopo doesn't. There's different needs in each area. And so my hope is that we have a fair representation on the steering group, and that we have also private landowners, a representative from a private landowner as well, so they can
That's a comment, just to respond to how it works. So it's the steering group, they don't vote on things. It's just, we try and build consensus. And if we don't get consensus, we just go back to the runanga, go back to council and say, these are the matters we agreed on, these are the matters we can't agree on.
I think though you want the people with the broad range.
You do want though perhaps people who have perhaps differing opinions to try and kind of get it a robust thing, rather than get 3 people who are exactly the same.
For sure.
Yes. So we have anyone who's interested in forming part of the so we've got Aroha, and what's your name? Alan Newton.
Mike, I've also got some message here. I'm just reading it sort of on the spot, it's a little small. From Cruz Uriti, he's mentioned there's 2 nominations from the Māori Tiki Tiki. Rikus Whana, he's putting forward 2 names, himself, and Araha Rikus.
I'd like to put through
Well,
Lisa, because she's one of the trustees down at Waipopo, and so she get a lot of feedback from Waipopo, so there would be a good, and she's got a lot of people who like to say.
So I'm Elizabeth Stevenson, and I'd like to be on that because I'm a trustee on the Waipopo. I've lived in Barrett's Road as well, so I understand how it works down there. And I'm also a landowner in Hopkinson Road, raised in Hopkinson Road as well. So yes, I'd like to be there on the steering committee. Thank you.
I think we have Alan down the front here. Yeah, he's just coming to the mic.
I'm Alan Newton, who people didn't know me. I farm, I'm manager, I suppose, and director of Waipopo Farm, which farms all around the area, plus most of the area that you're talking. I lease off the Maori people and have for years. I know what the land means to them, and I hope we've cared for it and kept rates, etc. well and truly up to date over the time and given the people fair and rent. The reason I'm standing is we had a meeting for the freehold people of Waipopo, and they elected myself and 2 others, but haven't stood yet, but And I feel like I'm a bit independent. I don't own land, so I'm not emotionally involved, but I was also got a clear head and picture of a lot of things. I was on Horticulture New Zealand for 15 years, where I sat on various boards. For example, Lucy, which is land use and change and intensification. I was also responsible for a lot of the funding for research, for the environment, etc. So I feel I would be a good independent person to stand.
My name is Aroha. I'm a descendant of Huirapa. I was raised in Temuka, went to Temuka High School. I moved on and became a high school teacher in Christchurch into the North Island, and I taught kura kaupapa in the end in the secondary, and my children were raised in kura kaupapa. I've been back for about 8 years now. I've completed a law degree. I'm interested in what is happening at Arawhenua Waipopo. I'm also interested in why we didn't receive back our other lands that were taken, but beside all of that, which were in Māori Hill, and Taraki Paua is not mentioned in this as well. However, I'm not looking to advance any of that unless the people have discussed it. I'm interested in what the people say. I advocate strongly for our rangatiratanga. I'm interested in what the council's proposal and their framework, how they developed that. I'm not clear myself on how they got to where they got, and I'd like to be thoroughly involved in moving through that process. I'm interested in the development, and there's a part in there that we haven't touched on in the proposal, and that's there's a commercial element there. I'm interested in how that commercial element came about and what they want to do with it. I'm interested in the farming concept that's happening. I'm interested in papakainga. I'm interested in the land rights of all of our people that are now residented in our reserves. I'm interested in all of the Māori lands, general land laws. I want to be a part of this development, and I would like to represent and be a voice for those who don't feel they are able to live in a different part of Temuka, are not living here, and those that do live here. Kia ora, tēnā tātou.
So, you said we were saying?
So Cruz is on the Zoom meeting here. I'm not sure if you want to speak it. He's on the speaking.
Give me a tick. Try talking. See if you can talk for me. Can you try talking, please?
Kia ora koutou. Tēnā koutou katoa. O aura ki Temuka, ko Puka ke Turoto, ko Waita ke Te Awa, ko Huirapa, ko Hurere, kai ro eke me te raki tāma ka haku, ko Kaitahu, ka māmo i Waitaha, ana hoki ka iwi, ko Raituru, Uruwā, Taki Timu, ka Huru, anu ko Waka, ko Cruz Takuikoa, mo Oto Tareha. I think it's best in terms of representation for multiple generations to be represented on this board. I am fairly young and wish to put forward the interests of the next generation. I do have experience in governance. I've sat on the Kahununu board as co-treasurer. I have multiple interests in politics and policy. I spent 4.5 years in a papakainga in Wellington at Taputaranga Marae underneath the mentorship and tutorship of my mentor Bruce Stewart. And so what I'd like to do is I'd like to be put forward to represent the next generation in terms of our understanding and dealings with the land, the waters, and the people associated to Waipopo and Arowhenua. I have done my best leading up to this hui to make sure as many people are as informed as possible. 14 minutes and agenda regarding the which is not something that many people have undertaken on behalf of the rest of the whānau and hapu who are not actually representative within the whare that you guys are currently in. I'm more than happy to go out of my way to look for the aspirations of the tipuna, for the rangatahi, for the tamariki, and for the whenua. And I would really appreciate if someone would stand behind me and stand next to me in order to make sure that this happens. Kami.
I'll stand for that, boy.
So we've got 4 people from the floor. Can you incorporate 4?
Are they all, so we've got Māori, multiple land, representation from everywhere in your steering group?
I believe that we do.
Okay, so you've got a general landholder from Arowhenua.
So that's all I've got. So I think we're going to ask the lovely lady to close our meeting out with karakia. Alright, do you want to close this out with karakia?
I'd like to hand that over to Aroha.
I was just to say, on behalf of the Registered Council, thanks so much for coming. It's been great. We really do want to try and understand what your aspirations here, and that's what it's all about. And thanks so much for the people who put their hand up to be in the steering group. So just the next step is we'll meet as a steering group over the next month. We'll have another hui, which will probably be online, and so we'll try and present a draft concept of what we've come up with. And then the steering group will have one final meeting before making a recommendation to council. So thank you very much.
E moe tō tātou nei karikia, ka mehi tau atu ki a koe te tangata I homai nei o nei o ngā whakaro. I takato mai nei I ngā whakaro nui mā mātai. Ana, hiwa no tēnā koe e te rangatira. Anau nei homai nā o ngā whakaro o au rangi. Rauimi rangahau hoki I homai nei. Tēnā kōrua. Just before closing, is there anyone else who would like to do the karakia? Iwi anō, anei nā. I tō mātou I tarangi nei no tō mātou e tuku whakamoe me te kōri ki a koe ma oro manakitanga ki ronga tō mātou nei. Kia tau hoki tō wairo tapu o ngā tupuna I homai nā, I ronga te nākau tēnā o tēnā. Ano hoki e ngā whakaro nui I te aroha ki roto I nei o ngā whakatutukitanga, ana te kaupapa ki moi a mātou. Kei hanga whari, ka tutuki ano hoki I ngā whakaro nui o tēnā. O ngā o ngā reo I homai nā I wangi I te kaupapa nei. Heoi anō e te matua, kia tau tō wairua tapa ki rongo tēnā, kia whai hoki I te huarahi ki mua I ngā wehinga, kei rongo I te rohi, kia tau atu ki ngā kainga, whakaro nui ki ngā kaumātua, I noho taha atu ki ngā kainga. Ka waihoa ki I nei o ngā kupu o te kore, raiti, whanno, haramai te toki, haumi, hui e, tai ki e.